Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Barrens Chat Podcast. I'm Sod, and with me tonight is my co-host Guck. This is a podcast about World of Warcraft by two guys who play it. Guck, we are officially ending the first week of the corruption vendor in 8.3. I would say so far it is a success, kind of. How about you? You're currently taking a hiatus.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this last week. I do think that this is the appropriate change that they needed to make. There needed to be a corruption vendor that gives players the agency that is really needed to kind of push the higher end meters stuff that people want to do, and people who are still playing the game this late into 8.3, they deserve to have that option. So that's a huge plus. But again, much like how it worked in Legion, and obviously it was much more proportionate of a response in Legion, just because the legendary system was pervasive throughout the entire expansion, and corruption is just it's just a facet of 8.3. So for me, I feel like I'm kind of in the same boat as people who didn't get the right legendaries and ended up kind of falling out of love with retail WoW and its combat systems. But even as someone who didn't really play 8.3, even though I know essentially nothing about corruption, I didn't have to go get corrupted gear. I didn't need to go, farm and balance my corruption with my corruption resistance. I still don't feel into it enough to want to go and invest my time in getting into 8.3. It's odd because I know they're doing a lot of stuff to make 8.3 more palatable, and we're going to talk about a lot of that stuff in this week's episode, but I still don't feel like it's enough to get me back into the game.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can understand that. I had probably my most successful week in WoW on like a personal level, other than any sort of mythic progression that I've had, like I think ever. I completed an 18 dungeon, which isn't, that big of a deal, but it's an 18. It's still challenging. I am one dungeon away from finishing my Keystone Master for this season, which is I haven't done ever, even when we were mythic raiding in Legion. I just never really got into that. I would do my weekly and then call that it. So I've been like pushing keys. My IO scores got to 2K. Unfortunately for me, the corruption that I need hasn't got on the vendor yet, so I'm still kind of patiently waiting for that. But like just overall, just really loving and enjoying this reset. I did like a plus 12 on like 3 other characters other than my main. So like WoW for me is just awesome right now. My guild is starting Mythic Nyalotha tomorrow night, so Tuesday, that's the reset, so it would be tonight for the people that are listening on Tuesday when this episode releases. So unfortunately I'm back to like a regular work schedule tomorrow, so I'm up really early and I have to like adapt to that and get used to that schedule while I'm gonna be at work, and just really excited to open my chest, see what is for sale on the corruption vendor this week. Just a lot to look forward for me logging in tomorrow, and hopefully I'm not disappointed with that vendor.
So yeah, especially with the vendor, there's a lot that's new about 8.3 since the release of the patch. The biggest thing that I think Blizzard was trying to do, or two of the bigger things that they're trying to do to get people back in, definitely that corruption vendor, and then also changes to getting your legendary cloak ranked up.
Yeah, so obviously, like, you did a few horrific visions. They're pretty challenging. They made it so that you don't have to do multiple horrific vision runs to rank up your cloak. So if you're capable of doing it, you can complete your cloak upgrade in one run. So you can go from rank 1 to rank 15 in 15 runs, theoretically, or 16. I don't know how the math works out. But it's fairly simple. Maybe it'll be tough earlier on. I think you have to do all 4 objectives when you get to rank 8 or 9. It might not even be till 10. So it's certainly doable. It gets easy. Like, which is good because it allows you to use the corruption, and also completing all 5 chests in a horrific vision gives you quite a few echoes of Nyalotha, which are used to buy corruption from the vendor. So not only are you gaining corruption resistance, but you're also gaining the currency to either purchase another vessel of horrific vision because you can use them for that as well, or purchase that corruption that you're chasing in case you don't get lucky with the RNG. So overall, a pretty good system. I did a couple of them on my alts this week. I have a rank 15 cloak on 2 of my characters, so um, it's okay. Horrific visions are, they were cool, and now they're just kind of like a boring chore. This is something I'm concerned about in the future of WoW for like Torghast, like how long until it turns into like a boring chore. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But that's kind of what horrific visions are now. I've been soloing 5 mask horrific visions, which uh, are easy, but they're also challenging. If you make a mistake, it is very punishing in there. So you kind of have to be paying attention and making sure that you're not, taking unnecessary sanity loss, which is tough. But it's like a 25-minute run. You get it over with, and then you're done for the week when you get your 470 corrupted piece, and you just hope that it's a good piece.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. I think the two main things that I would criticize, or at least the one main criticism that I have about this new system, the issue that people have with systems by and large is the the gating that is necessitated to kind of keep people around the same point and effectively prolong the content of a patch. I understand that, there was a choke point in your progress with your cape that was basically limited by how often you could go in there and attain the rank up for your cloak. Now, it seems like this is a much better system, right? You're not limited per week for how many ranks that you can gain, but there is still a choke point. They haven't gotten rid of the choke point. They've just moved the choke point up one step. It seems like you still have to do the assaults. You still have to go around and do the daily/weekly content in order to get those vessels to get in and then do those horrific visions. So while it is a better system once you get into it, the choke point still remains, and you still have to go through the content that isn't really what people want. I think the best system would be there is still a cap. You still have to play, week after week to continue ranking up your cape, but you don't have to use these vessels, or the vessels are used differently. It doesn't feel any different when you still have to go. If you're a character, I should rephrase this. It doesn't feel any different for a character coming back into BFA in 8.3, because you still, if you're behind, you still have to go through and grind out those assaults to get enough of those the vessels to then go into the visions. And sure, once you get into the visions, you can keep ranking up, but you still have to do the content of the patch that I think bothered most people, was the idea that, okay, I have to do assaults like we had to do Legion assaults again. One thing, because you mentioned how they're getting boring, these visions are getting boring. I can totally see why. It seems like every week or so, I'm not sure exactly what the system is, you basically switch between Orgrimmar and Stormwind, and that's kind of it. Even with 2 different environments, you're doing essentially the same thing that entire week. And with Torghast, it's going to be the same environment more or less every time. I mean, sure, thematically it'll be basically identical, and you'll have different, maybe there's procedurally generated floors or stairs or however they want to do it, but the replayability and the variety that you get in a setting like Torghast is based on the anima powers that you choose. So even for a DPS Death Knight, let's say you're doing Frost DK, you will never have 2 of the same Torghast runs, because you will always be able to choose different anima powers that will synergize in radically different ways, in ways that you may not have anticipated, because you'll get new anima powers, and that system alone is basically, that's the bread and butter of roguelike games, and that's why they're so successful. it's because of just how even playing through the same stages, the same levels, with either a different character or different items that you attain along the way, that brings so much variety and so much fun and replayability, which is really what you want in a system like this. You want to legitimately want to replay it. So I'm actually not worried about that. I think the Torghast system is enough of its own system to not be marred by systems like this in the past. Again, this is, purely speculative because we don't have alpha content access. Well, we don't have alpha access. We have access to content only that other people are putting out. And of course, there can be a lot of changes along the way. But still, my big criticism about the visions, sure, it's going to be boring. It's something that's going to turn into a chore. But the issue is they have moved the choke point. They haven't really gotten rid of the choke point. You still have to go in there, farm your... I even forget what the currency is, but you have to get those vessels, the coalescing visions. Yeah, and that to me is the choke point that I personally don't want to deal with, and that's one of the large barriers preventing me from going back into 8.3.
Yeah, totally fair. And just to make another comparison to Torghast, I guess, or a concern that I have to it, I guess, if you watch and consume the WoW content like you and I do, it seems like, if you're trying to push in Torghast, and we don't know what sort of currency or how far in you need to go to get the material you need to craft your legendary, I would imagine the farther you go, probably the better off you are. Concern I have is how long it takes, right? I mean, you're looking at an hour and a half, 2 hours a run, right? It's depending on how far you go. That's essentially like a raid night almost. So you have to schedule pretty much a raid for yourself, block out enough time to raid in order to, do a Torghast run to an appropriate time length. I mean, we don't know what that is going to be, right, as far as the crafting materials, but have you thought about that at all? Because I know I haven't brought it up to you yet, and it is a concern of mine that I just thought of this week.
Yeah, that's a very valid concern, and I think the biggest issue with that is essentially the relationship between difficulty, reward, and time investment. If it takes an hour to finish the Torghast experience fully, that's going to mean something radically different if the difficulty curve is very slow and steady, or, how quickly does that difficulty ramp up? I'm thinking about games like Risk of Rain. So every time you advance through the teleporter onto the next stage, there is a static advancement in difficulty, but then there's also a steady advancement in difficulty based on the amount of time that you're spending. So if you spend a lot of time on one floor, I'm imagining, if you spend a lot of time, the next floor should be a lot more difficult because you could have just gone a little bit faster. So what I hope is that there is a very strong link between the time spent in Torghast and the skill at which you're executing it. I would love to see essentially a time penalty where the longer you spend on a floor, the harder the next floor will be. So it incentivizes you to play faster, to play risky, to, make those choices, to play your character to the maximum ability, and to get to that next floor sooner so that you're not as hindered by that kind of dynamic difficulty increase based on how long you take. So what I would like to see is you can go slow and steady and, do everything that you need to do at your own pace. But if that is how you want to play it, it's going to be much harder later on. So you're kind of playing against your best interests by doing that. My biggest issue with length of time for this would be if it's very easy to go fast and you can just kind of breeze through a lot of the floors, but that difficulty, kind of doesn't ramp up and you still have to spend a lot of time in it. That's when it's going to be really boring. Blizzard has to be... They can't be afraid to make Torghast difficult. I think it's a good thing for people to go in, spend, maybe 3 minutes longer than they should on their first floor, and then just get rocked on the next floor and think, okay, I did something wrong there. I need to change the way I did that. If Blizzard is afraid to make Torghast difficult, I think people will end up being bored. I think they won't find the challenge. They won't find the idea of like, oh, I should push myself to go faster. They'll just feel like, okay, this is a time investment. I have to invest this much time to get to this floor. And then they just kind of go through the motions. So I haven't really thought about the duration being an issue. I would like to see them handle it the way that so many other successful games in that style, in the style of Torghast, have handled it. But again, we just have to wait and see. There's not enough known about Torghast for us to really make a definitive decision yet.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I hear you. And just because, like, even though it's not a roguelike dungeon, horrific visions, like, are pretty difficult. And, like, you're in charge of the difficulty with how many masks you put on. And I'll tell you this, like, I went through the side objectives pretty easily last week. I had 3 vessels, and I failed on Thrall because of like my like crappy attention span twice, and on my last vessel I completed it. And it's challenging, and I think like it's good to see Blizzard going into this like this route where like they're creating challenging content outside of like mythic rating. I'll tell you this, like 15 plus 15 dungeons where you get max reward, not max Titan Residium, but max reward are, becoming really like a breeze for like me and like the handful of people that I'm playing with right now. So it's definitely cool to see challenging content. I'll tell you, I was definitely very frustrated and very nervous about wasting all my vessels trying to push that 5 mask, but I got it done. It was definitely satisfying. It's just, it's good. I think they're headed in the right direction, and I think they can pull it off with Torghast. But there are a lot of people that are, have been voicing concerns, and I think rightfully so. But I also think that Blizzard has, done a good job so far with the development of Shadowlands on alpha, just from watching. If you guys want to throw alpha key to Guck and myself, that'd be great. Guck will definitely activate his sub and go at it. Just saying. And I'm looking forward to it. I really can't wait for this expansion to drop, but I'm also like really like enjoying the remainder of BFA and trying to take advantage of my time in here right now.
Yeah, it's systems like the mask system in Horrific Visions that give me actually hope about the future of WoW systems. I think knowing that players want to take agency over the difficulty of their content that they're completing. I mean, that was made obvious when we got Mythic Plus in Legion, right? Like that system blew up immediately. People loved pushing it. They did challenging stuff as well as, trying to min-max it. If you can remember, Legion Maw of Souls farming was like the best way to farm AP. It's hard for me to remember all that stuff, but effectively giving players the agency over the difficulty of content that they complete, and then allowing them to kind of socially experiment and share, like, okay, let me see how this works in this group. Let me see how this works in that group. Building social dynamics, seeing how they can better work in a group. All of that is gameplay that comes out as, it's an emergent system where outside of just like, okay, it's a dungeon, but there's a timer and we increase the health of and damage of the mobs, right? That system alone brought so much to the players because we got, Raider IO, we got people challenging themselves, we got eventually the MDI, right, where it's like set at a very high Mythic Plus level, and that's, there for a reason. They're not doing Mythic Plus 10s, they're doing Mythic Plus 20s, plus 22, 23, just to get in their application runs, or whatever they were called, the qualifiers. So I personally, I think this is a big step in the right direction. I like the idea that Blizzard is continuing to give players agency, but I hope that it doesn't mean, I hope that agency remains in Torghast. I hope there's a way to determine how difficult it is, either through our own pacing or through just simply selecting the difficulty at the beginning. I think that would fix a lot of what Torghast has potentially in trouble, right? If there's a static difficulty, it's either going to be too hard for the lower tier players or too easy for the upper tier players. So there needs to be some level of agency like we have with masks in Torghast.
Yeah, I think that's well put. And I mean, also like Ouroboros was released this week. We got our first look at the major hub in Shadowlands. Have you checked anything out at all? Have you seen the art in there or anything like that?
All I've seen is art. I haven't seen much besides the content that I've pulled out of the main sites, Wowhead, stuff that you get to see on Twitch. But yeah, nothing serious.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I did. I saw like a couple like sneak peek videos, just like people kind of walking through it and checking it out. It looks, really cool, and I'm definitely excited. Like one of my first like favorite things to do with the new expansion is just exploring the new city, just kind of seeing where everything is, like getting my way around, just figuring it out. I think that's like an underrated part of it because the cities are so, well put together and look cool. Other than Dazar'alor really, because that's just a disaster with things all over the place. But just everything about it, like, and we didn't really get a new city in Legion, right? It was just Dalaran all over again for anybody that played Wrath of the Lich King. But Dazar'alor and Barrens were both really cool and just visually appealing, and I think Ouroboros is going to be the same. I even saw Asmongold like sneak out and Farsight out to check out the Arbiter, so that looks pretty cool. It looks like the Arbiter's sleeping or like dormant or something like that, so interesting to see what the story is there.
Yeah, how that ties into the main story, I believe the Arbiter is the one who selects which covenant you should be going towards, and because the Arbiter has been dormant or inactive or whatever it is, all of the souls that have died in the material plane, whatever our plane is, are just being sent into the Maw. So that was a part of Sylvanas' plan to cause as much death, to bring as much soul, anima power to that Maw and kind of bypass the covenants. So yeah, I mean, that will be an integral part of the story. The big vibes I get from Ouroboros is it's like combination of a lot of things that what we had in Legion. You have elements that are very similar to any hub city. I think just from its design, we're getting a lot of kind of Undercity themes, which is appropriate because the Undercity was stolen from us. But it's a better Undercity. So it's concentric rings, and those rings have sections, and those sections all have unified themes. So it's important, right? It's a well-designed hub city, but then you also get a lot of these kind of personal flavor elements with the Covenants, where it kind of feels like your class hall back in Legion. And I loved the class halls, and it looks good. It's got some subtle like Titan elements to it. It's got a lot of ethereal elements to it. It's just familiar enough to not be off-putting, but it is still something stylistically we're sort of used to and we're sort of not used to. So yeah, I'm just excited because, as always, the art team killed it. It looks well designed. So one of the issues we had with Dazar'alor, stuff was everywhere, and it was just frustrating to have to get on your flying mount and fly from one end of the city to the other just to, turn in your mission table stuff. So it looks good. It looks like it's functional. I like the aesthetic. I hope that we have, and I'm sure we're going to get a mode of transportation that's an instant warp, kind of like what we had with our Dalaran Hearthstones. I'm hoping we get some form of outside of the Hearth warp to here, because dang, it is so useful if you're doing content, especially content like unlocking the allied races, to have your standard Hearth, your Dalaran Hearth. If you're playing a class that has like that class hall Hearth, it's nice to have world mobility. So I would like to see another, just like a nice little quality of life thing where we get a free warp to Ouroboros from anywhere. I mean, in the Shadowlands or outside. I think that would be good.
Yeah, I think that is like an incredibly underrated thing. That being said, like also I still use my Dalaran Hearthstone whenever like I'm on cooldown and I need to get to Org, like, or back to Zuldazar. I just use that, port to Org, and then port back to Zuldazar. So it's not too bad. It helps, but I agree with you. I'd love to see an Ouroboros Hearthstone just to, make my life that much easier. And then when you hit endgame, you got to assume that like to put your standard Hearthstone probably in Revendreth close to the first raid tier, like or whichever one you're running a lot of. That's like another thing I like to do a lot. Like I did it in Legion. I'm sure you did too. Like with Suramar and Emerald Nightmare when we were raiding those.
Yeah, and I mean, some people talk like that is one of the elements of the game where Blizzard throwing us a bone doesn't simplify the game. It simplifies travel. It simplifies one of the most menial, boring, unimportant aspects of the patch or of an expansion of the game entirely, because you're already going to be you should have, or if not, you are currently questing in those zones, going to dungeons for the dungeon quests while you're leveling in those zones, running dungeons, doing your world quests. You will be exploring the area so much that the travel aspect of it is totally fine to be cut out. So I have no problem with Blizzard filling my bag with Hearthstones so that I can get around faster. That is a quality of life addition that in no way makes the gameplay like easier. It doesn't trivialize anything. You will be doing that travel. Honestly, if the art team makes a good zone, once you get flying, you're going to be willingly just traveling. You're going to get on and play to just look around at stuff. I am so confident in that in Shadowlands, because I know I will be flying around Ardenweald just looking at stuff once we have flying. Just to look at it. Kind of the same way when we got flying in BFA, it was pretty sweet to actually fly up to all the high mountaintops in the Zuldazar zone. To fly around, I mean, in Legion, largely what I enjoyed was flying through Suramar, flying around the Nighthold. Like, flying brings in so much more just like voluntary travel time. Aside from obviously going as quickly between points, that's a great benefit that flying brings. But flying also gives you the option to travel in a way that's not inconvenient. And you can actually enjoy the stuff that they've put out there without just being like, oh, great, now I have to, go from point A to point B and it's going to take me this long. So yeah, I'm all for, give me the Hearthstones, fill up my bag.
Yeah, fill them up, and honestly, like I know that we're gonna have Pathfinder again, and honestly, I don't really hate Pathfinder. I don't know how you feel about it. Like, I get it; they don't want us to just get to level 60 and then just start flying everywhere and never explore the zones again, right? They spent a lot of time creating them, so it doesn't really bother me, and I think Pathfinder is okay, right? If you're somebody that has a lot of alts, think about the gold you're probably chucking into it to just fly. So it's a tough like first two patches, and then flying is released, Pathfinder Part 1 and 2. Uh, I always get Part 1 done pretty much in like the first week of playing, and then when Part 2 is released, I'm worried about that. So I just think like, if you're a WoW veteran player and you like flying, you know what Part 1 is ahead of time going into the expansion, so you can literally get that done in the first week depending on how much you're playing. I mean, maybe it takes you like a month if you're playing super casual. It's doable and it's not that hard. And then part two is usually at least somewhat aggravating. And then, you get it done and you're flying. I think it's worth it. I think it's worth investing in just completing the achievement and just soaring through the skies. Just way better for everything.
My opinion on Pathfinder, I think you take the rep requirement and drop it down to Revered, because that's more or less where you'll get through the end of your questing and a little bit of your world daily quest type thing. I mean, who knows? Nerf the reputation requirement, but then buff the travel requirement. I think just having the full kind of map picture uncovered isn't enough. I would like to see unmarked points of interest that you have to visit, that you have to be within very few coordinates from, that are obscure hidden caves, landmarks, mountaintops, scenic points. I think they should add stuff like that and have it be unmarked, so you have to explore to get it, and that effort increase is offset by the decrease in reputation required. So instead of just like, oh, world quests are out, let me clear all the world quests on the board for rep, you don't have to worry about rep. You're thinking, oh, I need to explore this island. Or, I mean, if you're going to cheap out on it, I need to look up a guide, see these pictures, and then go through. But still, you're at least forced to physically see more of what is actually out there worth seeing, as opposed to just seeing the world quest areas. Because you go there, you do the quest, you leave. You know, I would like to see those changes.
Yeah, and another thing I'd like to see change is like the reward you get. I know they're not going to have emissaries, but they're going to have something like similar to it. Like it's not going to be like BFA and Legion emissaries where you do 4 quests and you get the reward. I'd like to be able to control the reward I get, right? Like it's, randomly generated every time. Like why not just have it be the gold amount, the resource, like in BFA it's war resources, or you can get armor, or like in either like a trinket or a ring or something like that. Like, let me pick, I think. Like, I don't need AP, I don't need any of the gear from the World Quest rewards, and I don't need order resources. So like I don't know, like that stuff is really great early in the expansion, and you probably get excited about it, right? Like when we got that first weapon one early on, like before the old deer race started, and you were trying to maximize yourself. So I think that's really cool and like good gameplay. Like it allows the player to choose and like choose their reward, which you actually get to do for most quests, right? You get to choose a reward. So I think it'd be nice to be able to choose a reward, and I also think that just because I'm greedy and I'd like the gold reward right now going in, like as BFA is coming to an end, because I don't need anything else. But I also think it'd be good for the start of the expansion too, where you can get like, you're trying to min max your character early on so you're ready to go come that first raid night.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're getting the element of choice with our Mythic Plus chest. That is a massive increase. Why not give us a little bit more of that choice with our emissary or, daily/weekly rewards? I would like to see, like, there's 4 or 5 main categories that we get. It's going to be the mission resource, so like war resources, order hall resources, gold. You're going to get the grindable resource, your AP system. You get a random item or something else that they've added into the system, something like an essence, something else, whatever, something else random, catch all. I would be totally fine with them giving you a choice between 2 and then randomizing it every week. So like one week it's gold or AP, and then the next week it's order resources or a random item, and that item could be a weapon or a trinket or whatever it is, and they randomize that too. I don't know. I would like to see, in any form or fashion, more agency over what we get and what we do. Because, like you said, that was one of the core things from back in even Classic. You complete a quest, and then you get to choose your reward. And that's part of what makes it feel rewarding, because you have agency over what it is you're getting. And you can say definitively, I want this instead of that. And that helps you. I mean, sure, with a lot of choices, you may get buyer's remorse. But with 2 or 3 choices, it makes you feel more empowered and in control over what it is you're getting.
Yeah, I think that's all we have today. I think we spent like a lot longer on things that we were going to.
Yeah, we didn't have much going into it because, again, like we didn't get new zones in Shadowlands. Classic has effectively, the well has drowned. No, the well has dried up. I am not drowning in it anymore. So yeah, I mean, there's just not a lot going on. All the retail stuff, it's kind of the same week in, week out. Aside from how high you can push those mythic pluses, and if your guild's still raiding, maybe you got a new boss down. But it's just been the grind.
I'm trying to convince Guk to come back to retail. It hasn't been working, but I respect his decision. Although I have been messaging him, telling him to get back into it every day. A lot of our friends are playing right now, like a lot of people that we played with in Legion and early in PFA. So like I'm loving WoW right now, and I think it's great. And I also keep the feedback coming. BarrensChatPod@gmail.com, on Twitter @BarrensChatPod, and just keep the feedback coming. Let us know if you're playing Classic and what you're doing, because eventually, like, I'm at a point right now where I really don't have any other leveling to do in BFA, so I might hop over to there and level up a character, maybe get ready for Burning Crusade Classic when that eventually comes.
Yeah, as always, we appreciate you guys listening. Check us out on the website, baronschat.podbean.com. Throw us a follow, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and we will see you in the next one.